Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Kyle and Jackson. I'm here with Kyle, and I'm also here with a special guest. We'll get into that in a second. First, I just want to let you guys all know that we are now on every single podcast distributor, pretty much, except for iHeartRadio. We're still pending there, but pretty much everything else. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts, we're now on there. So, search On the Sideline podcast or Jackson Kruger. I know sometimes my name comes up better. Every Sunday we should have a podcast, so be sure to look on there. We also have some news to get to with the worst take of the week. Kyle, last week it seems like I am continuing my downward spiral of my third straight worst take of the week with saying the Ravens will win the Super Bowl. So do you have another terrible video to make me watch this week?
Yeah, let me pull up the video here really quick. Of course, it's it's going to be Tampa Bay Lightning related as they lost to the Boston Bruins in the playoffs. I will find the video so you continue your thing.
Okay, yes. Last week, just terrible. So Luke, also, I'll introduce everyone now. I'm here with Kyle, of course, as always, and Luke G. You know him from the great Luke G's Field Review. Luke, here's what we do every week: is that Kyle and I get the fans to vote on who had the worst take of the week, and the loser has to watch a YouTube video from a terrible game from our past sports team's experience. Last week, Kyle brutally made me watch revisit the Lightning getting swept by the Blue Jackets. And the worst made video of all time, I have to say. I mean, it starts off and they're saying the Lightning took the easy way by the easy way? They make the playoffs by winning 62 games. That's the easy way, tying the record for most wins ever. Just a terrible thing. First time a worst take of the week has gotten me actually angry with that Lightning video. Now you're doing this again to me, Kyle. You're just terrible.
Yeah. So this is a bad video for you, but this is a great video for me. I'm going Game 7 of May 27th, 2011. Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. We got the Tampa Bay Lightning losing to the future Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins. So you can go, there's a 4.5-minute video of this one that you can watch. All the highlights, get all the action. Go check that one out.
Okay, I'll have plenty more to complain about next week, I guess. But this week, nothing to complain about. We have a very fun show planned. We're going to rank the top 25 quarterbacks of all time. We're going to get a list. We're doing it draft style, as we like to do. And I think the way we should do this is that I think typically I would say the guest, Luke, should go. But I think that given who's probably going to go number one, I think we should give it to the Patriots fan to get the number one overall pick. And then, Luke, you go 2, and then I'll go 3. Luke, does that sound good with you?
That works for me. I'm ready.
All right. So, Kyle, why don't you start things off and pick Derek Carr so that way the Raiders fans don't get mad at you?
Yeah.
I have been following that one.
So let me tell you about Joe Flacco.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, this is an obvious one, especially given my allegiance to New England. I'm going to go with Tom Brady here. The unequivocal GOAT, 6-time Super Bowl champion, master of the clutch moment. Nobody's had a longer and greater tenure of success at quarterback than Tom Brady himself. You could make an argument, I think, that at the peak of their powers, maybe guys like Manning, Rodgers, Marino, or even Montana were more talented, but nobody got it done more than Brady when it mattered the most. And, it's going to get skewed because of these last few years, I think, but 18 seasons as a healthy starter, he's reached 9 Super Bowls and won 6 of them. So essentially he's 50% of the time he's in the Super Bowl, and then 33% of the time he's winning the Super Bowl. So I think if you're having that sort of efficiency, you're doing something right. So I'll make the easy one and go with Tom Brady here. Nobody have any comebacks because there's no comeback to that.
Yeah, definitely the easy choice. Luke, what do you think about Tom Brady at number 1?
I mean, I can make the case for somebody else being number 1, but it's hard to argue with somebody who has as many rings as he has. He's over there looking like the Mandarin with all those rings, so it's hard to argue with that. But I can't kill him on it. I just can't kill him on it. I love me some Tom Brady. And I think what Tom Brady brings to a team is out of this world. I'm looking forward to see what he do with Bruce Arians and the Buccaneers. So Kyle, I'll give you that one. It's a good pick. I figured that one was coming first.
Yeah, Tom Brady. I mean, 14-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro. 3 of them were first team. The list goes on and on. Obviously, 6 Super Bowl champions is probably the biggest thing on his resume. Also, 541 touchdowns to just 179 interceptions. Only player in NFL history to have over 500 touchdowns while doing it with under 200 interceptions. And so, yeah, it's hard to go wrong there. I've said before, I think you can argue more people, but he was also number 1 on my list. Who is number 2 who is going to be picked number 2 here for you, Luke?
Listen, this one right here is a no-brainer. This would probably be who I can almost argue could be a little bit ahead, but it's got to be Peyton Manning. I feel like Peyton Manning is literally the definition of what a field general is. And to me, a guy with 14 Pro Bowls, he's been a Super Bowl champ 2 times, and was the first to get to that 500 and something touchdown ratio, although he did have quite a few interceptions. What Peyton Manning brought to this game as a whole, and what Peyton Manning did for his team as a whole, is almost unrivaled. And to me, if you cannot have a top 25 list without a Peyton Manning on it somewhere in the top 1 or 2 spots. So for me, Peyton Manning, hands down, has to be on this list all time.
Yeah, I'm with you. Little known fact about Kyle: he is a huge Peyton Manning fan. Just loves Peyton Manning. Kyle, what is your thought of Peyton Manning here at 2?
Okay, so I feel like the 2 and 3 I think is the biggest debate when it comes to quarterbacks of all time. I had Montana 2. I just for one of the most accurate and complete quarterbacks in the history of the game, and I just think him with Bill Walsh was just unstoppable, and he was nearly the first player ever to, the 49ers nearly three-peated with him, and they probably would have three-peated if he didn't get hurt in that NFC Championship game against the Giants. And he's probably, outside of Bart Starr, the best playoff performer of all time. He's larger than life, Joe Montana. I would have went with him at 2, but I understand the argument for Manning as well. They're both up there.
Well, I'll give a count. Oh, here. No, you go ahead, Luke.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I can't kill that one either. I think Montana is lights out, but I just looked at what Peyton Manning did, and he didn't always have the best coach. Peyton Manning didn't always have the best coach, but yet he found ways to get it done. Tony Dungy got over there and helped out on some things, and he put together some stuff for him. But overall, Peyton Manning came into a situation where it was like, God, like, most people die in those situations. And to me, when you look at Montana had the coach. Like, that was the coach. That's a coach to have. And so, but I could definitely see Montana being in that mix. But for me, Manny got to be number 2. He has, if time is 1, Manny got to be 2.
Yeah, well, here's why I think I also had, right now I'm on with both of you guys. I have Brady at 1, Manning at 2. And you look at Manning by the numbers. He's a 10-time All-Pro, 7-time first-team All-Pro, which is tied for the most for quarterbacks. 14-time Pro Bowler, led the league in passing yards 3 times, led the league in touchdowns 4 times, retired as the all-time touchdown leader. And you want to compare that to Montana. His numbers are good. 3-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time touchdown leader. Never led the league in passing yards. I think that there's definitely, I would definitely say that I think Montana probably did better in the playoffs. I think that that's definitely the one X on Manning's mantle. But I would still say that Manning was so much better in the regular season that I think that's why I would say that I think Manning is better. What do you think about that, Kyle?
Yeah, I think you can easily make an argument that Manning is, the most talented quarterback of all time. He won 5 MVPs, which I don't necessarily see ever happening again. That's probably one of my 2 unbreakable records at this point. Mm-hmm. And I could see that argument, but the one knock on Manning, and unfortunately for him, it is a knock, even though I don't like grading quarterbacks strictly on winning or football players strictly on winning, because it's not the same as basketball, where one basketball player is so influential on winning a basketball game. But the knock on Manning is he won 1 Super Bowl when he was well past his prime and couldn't throw, with the Broncos, and then he won one Super Bowl with the Colts, and he finally got it done, and he got it done against probably the worst Super Bowl contender of the 2000s in that Bears team that was essentially a defense in Devin Hester. So, I mean, that would be my knock on Manning. It's a tough knock, but at the same time, I do think that Montana's ability to get it done compared to Manning's inability to get it done at the end of the season is the difference between the two for me.
All right. Well, I think Kyle's at this point having too much fun arguing against Peyton Manning, so we'll just move on and go to number 3. Number 3, I am not going with Montana here. I am going to go with someone who I think had the greatest season of all time. This is someone who he might not have played as long as some of these other guys, but I think that his peak was better than probably anyone in football. He's a 5-time first-team All-Pro, led the league in passing yards 5 times, led the league in touchdowns 3 times. Famously in 1984, threw for 48 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, records that weren't broken for another 2 decades. Dan Marino, I think, is the 3rd best quarterback of all time. Luke, what do you say to that?
Oh, I love that one. I love it. I think he's probably one of the more underrated Hall of Fame quarterbacks out there. People seem to often forget Dan Marino, and it's like there wasn't a pass Dan Marino could not make. And he did it while taking a beating. It wasn't like he was behind a great offensive line. He took a beating, and it wasn't like, oh, he couldn't do this. And the biggest knock for him was the fact that he never got that Super Bowl. But I would argue that Dan Marino probably would throw the ball further than Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and was deadly accurate. And to me, I think that pick at 3 is absolutely phenomenal. He was actually on my list. I didn't have him at 3, but he was definitely on my list in my top 5. And I think that you did a good job picking him up, in my opinion.
Kyle, thoughts on Marino?
Yeah, I had Marino at 5th. I do think he is a generational talent who put up insane numbers. And like I said, I don't like to just discount an entire player because he never won a Super Bowl. But I guess, he was a little snake bit not getting the Super Bowl, but it did, end up affecting his career. I thought the 2 things that really impressed me about Marino was obviously 1984, which you talked about, which I had. Let me see here. There was somebody who I saw this number. They factored that out to modern day NFL number in 2018. And they said that Marino's numbers would have been 5,668 yards and 58 touchdowns in 2018, which is just ungodly numbers. Not to mention, along with that, he tore his Achilles in 1993 and then came back the next season and threw for over 4,400 yards. And, his talent was just immense, and it was unfair to him that he had nobody around him on that team.
Yeah, and also ended his career with 420 touchdowns. So another some fun there. Kyle, number 4 here. We'll go around to you now. Who do you have as the number 4 quarterback of all time?
Well, I'll happily take Joe Montana. Like I said, I had him at like I said, I had him at 2, and he could do it all. And revolutionized the West Coast offense there with Bill Walsh. He won 8 straight playoff games, like I said, from 1988 to 90, where his touchdown to interception ratio was 22-2. And he would have won 3 straight Super Bowls, like I said, if he didn't get hurt at that time. And I guess the one knock on Montana is his regular season numbers don't quite live up to his playoff numbers. But at the same time, if he got it done in the most important games against the best teams, I'm willing to call him one of the best quarterbacks of all time. So I'll take him at 4.
Luke, we've already talked about Montana a little bit, but what are your thoughts on him going here at 4?
I'm not surprised Kyle did that one. I know Kyle was waiting on that pick. But I don't think it's a bad pick. I think that he has to be on this list as well, given his history. I can kind of take a few knocks at him at the fact that his toughest competition wasn't similar to some of the other quarterbacks ahead, in my opinion. I don't think he had as much adversity as those other guys. But I think Joe Montana was lights out. I was real close at one point to being a 49er fan because of Joe Montana. But being from Detroit, that was never going to happen. So I happily ride with my Lions, but I can't kill you on that pick. I think that it's a very good pick by you, and he should definitely be on this list.
Yeah, and I think that this is, again, it's going to come down to we're all going to have different opinions on what we think makes a quarterback great. And I kind of purposely left the term vague of just 25 greatest and left it at that so we can have different opinions. I have Montana at 8 because even though I do think he's great, his tape is very fun to watch. You know, you go back and watch his tape. It looks like you're watching a team play now. I mean, just that whole 49ers team, they very much played like a 2020 team. He's great. I have him at number 8 on my list. I think he's fantastic. Just a little bit lower than Kyle is.
Yeah, right, I get it.
Oh, go ahead. Mm-hmm, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. No, I was just going to give the floor to you if you want to go for your number 5 pick.
Okay, so my pick for number 5 is going to be a bit of a curveball, but I think he's probably more underrated than people think. I'm going to go with Warren Moon. I know nobody saw this coming, but for me, I remember Warren Moon very well, and he's a guy that I know that the stats can support what he does, but it was more than that. He was the Michael Vick before Michael Vick. He was the Lamar Jackson before Lamar Jackson. He literally gave it to you all. He had the ability to escape. He had the ability to be accurate. He had the tough road, the odds, you name it. He had it. He's the perfect underdog story. And the one thing I love about him is he rivaled all of that storm just to come out on the other end and become a Hall of Famer. I think what he brings to this list is validity. And as a person who I believe is a trendsetter and a generational talent, I think he is absolutely has to be on this list. I love Warren Moon, what he brought to the table, and should be.
Here's my sort of I had Warren Moon. I had him on the list. I had him at number 24, so we're definitely a pretty far off. I think Warren Moon was consistently great, consistently really good. The reason why I had him low on my list was because I feel like he never had that peak that some of these other guys have. But at the same, like I do, and I think that sometimes he was maybe more fun to watch than he was, actually, like, again, he was great, top 25 quarterback in my opinion. But I think 5 is a little bit high for me. Kyle, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I had him at 21. I think he's a super talented quarterback. And obviously, if he was able to play in the NFL from the beginning rather than having to go to Canada, who knows what his numbers would look like. I feel like he and coincidentally, as you were going through your thing, him and Michael Vick were my 2 biggest what ifs. Like, what if Warren Moon didn't play in Canada? And what if Michael Vick didn't go to prison when he was probably at his prime? And so I understand that part. I did have him a little further back because the accolades don't necessarily match up because he missed the first 6 years of his career, which is kind of expected. But in terms of, if you're looking at a guy for like pure arm talent, Warren Moon's definitely up there. The guy could sling the ball better than anybody. So I'm with you on that.
Not to mention, you said it yourself, he missed the first 6 years of it and still almost had 50,000 passing yards. That's crazy. And doing it without having always the best team around him. So I love a good underdog story, and that's why I said Warren Moon was going to be in there. So here he is.
Yeah, no, and I should also say Warren Moon, one of my favorite all-time players as well. But I want to be objective here on this list, which is why I had him a little bit lower. Anyways, I'll go on to my pick here at number 6. It's going to be the person who I have number 4 on my board. I'm going with the all-time passing leader and the all-time touchdown leader, Giroux Brees, here at number 6. I had him at number 4 on my list. I mean, listen, no one's thrown more passing yards than him. No one's thrown more touchdowns than him. He's been he's only been a one-time first-team All-Pro. He's never won an MVP, but we all know he probably should have won a few. He definitely is hurt by having been playing against Brady and Manning, 2 people we have above him on the list. But I think he's definitely worthy of he's at the top 4 spot on my board and a top 6 spot overall on our board.
So I had Brees number 8, and I felt like this was going to come into play. My argument against Brees was that, I think a lot, don't get me wrong, being the leading passer of all time is obviously, incredible. But at the same time, I also feel like a lot of the passing stats are skewed nowadays. So I tried not to look too much into, if I just did it by passing yards, then, Eli Manning's going to end up in my top 25. So I just, for one of the most accurate passers ever, I still feel like even at Brees' best, the best you could argue is he was the 3rd best quarterback in the league. You know, there was a reason that I still feel like watching football for these last 20 years, there's a reason that Brees only made one first team All-Pro for the NFL is because, you know, when it came down to it, when it was him, Brady, Manning, Rodgers, you know, he always felt fourth to me. So, I mean, that was just kind of the way I looked at it with Brees and why I had him a little lower. And it's probably a little unfair, but at the same time, like, I'm not ready to say that a guy who was, you know, the fourth best quarterback of his generation might be the sixth best quarterback of all time.
Well, I mean, I don't see the argument for Rodgers being better than Brees in my opinion, but I also think that the numbers won't back that up. I mean, I think yes, he was probably the third best quarterback of his generation, but the first two are number 1 and 2 on our board. I think he was just blocked behind a great era of quarterbacks. I mean, you get again the touchdown to interception ratio 547 to 237. I do hear you on the point that like you know, obviously passing stats are skewed, but even for his time, he led the league in touchdowns 4 times. He led the league in passing 6 times, and you know, Brady didn't do that. Manning didn't do that. So I think numbers-wise, you could say it's the bad defense, but I would also argue that his bad defense kept him out of the playoffs a bunch of years and kept him out of the MVP consideration a bunch of years. Luke, break the tie here. What do you think about this pick?
No, I'm with you. I'm with you, JK. I think that it's absolutely Brees has to be there. I mean, let's be honest. You go through Brees. The first time Brees got a legitimate coach with some respectability was Sean Payton. I know people are going to talk about what happened in San Diego, but look what really happened in San Diego. Like, imagine if he had Sean Payton from the very beginning. He would have did so much more. And I do understand the idea that these things can be a little bit skewed, but Giroux Brees literally is doing everything that they're doing, and his level of play hasn't dropped off. I can make the argument that, like JK said, he was just happened to be playing behind people who, in all honesty, had better teams and coaching than Giroux Brees, and he is still here doing it. So to me, I'm with you. I just think that, you know, to not have him there or to not put him this high would be an indictment on this list.
All right. So Luke doing exactly what I wanted you to do when you come in, agreeing with me and disagreeing with Kyle. Working out perfectly.
Working out. It's all a plan.
Exactly. All right. Number 7, Kyle, who do you have here?
All right. So another guy I had in my top 5 that I'm getting a little later. I had Johnny Unitas at number 7. You know, I'm going to go with the guy who was the original revolutionary to the passing attack. The big thing with Johnny U was he led the league in like fourth quarter touchdowns and game-winning drives. I think it was a combined 10 times throughout his career. And that was simply because people didn't understand how when the clock's winding down, maybe change it up and start throwing the ball a whole bunch when you're losing. And, you know, somehow the Colts were the first team to figure that out. So Johnny U was, you know, the best at it. And, you know, his numbers are going to look really bad compared to now. You know, this is the whole thing I was talking about with the numbers being skewed nowadays. But the way he revolutionized the game and revolutionized the passing attack way back when, I put Johnny U in the top 5. I get him at number 7, so that's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. No, I like Johnny Unitas. I had him at number 6 on my board. So, you know, he goes here at 7. You know, I mean, I think that I looked at a lot of stats, how good you were in the era, because I think that's an important thing to look at. You know, he led the league in touchdowns 4 times, led the league in passing 4 times. Obviously, he won Super Bowl 5. You talk about fourth quarter comebacks. They overcame a 7-point fourth quarter deficit in Super Bowl 5, despite turning the ball over 7 times to win that football game. A wild thing there. 5-time first team All-Pro, and he played for 18 years and had a positive touchdown to interception ratio, which was not easy to do back then. He had 290 touchdowns to 253 interceptions. Johnny Unitas, I don't hate this pick at all. What do you think, Luke?
I mean, it's Johnny. How do you you can't argue against that? I mean, he did a lot of great things, and to me, yeah, I can see how he could easily be in the top 5 for Kyle. I'm not like, to me, like, I remember the first time I got a chance to see it, and this is a shout out to what used to be a good channel with the ESPN Classics, and I remember watching the game and I was like, God, he just slinging that thing, and I remember thinking that this is how quarterbacks should be unapologetic. Yeah, sometimes the pass ain't gonna go the way you want to, but sling that thing. And I think that, to me, having Johnny on that list makes perfect sense in my opinion. I would have had him a little bit lower for me, but that's just me.
Gotcha. Well, moving on to the next pick, number 8 here on our board. Who do you have?
All right, so again, I tend to go with trends. This was a little bit of a hard one for me because for me, I was looking at who really stood out during the era. And this pick for me was a guy that, again, is another underdog who I don't think get as much praise as he probably should. And that is Dan Fouts. I just remember him very fondly, like probably more than I want to admit. And I remember just thinking, like, I could not think who else was on his team, and how was he doing this? And that was the deciding factor for me, putting him in my top 10, because I could not, for the life of me, tell you the other players that he had. I know he had some decent players out there. I know he had Winslow and stuff like that, but overall, it wasn't like he had this great team. And he was still performing, still taking a beating, still giving his team a chance to win. Here's a guy that literally went to 6 Pro Bowls, had, I think, 2 All Pros, and is a Hall of Famer. And I think I'm not sure, because sometimes I draw a blank as I get older, but I'm pretty sure he was like an Offensive Player of the Year or something like that at one point in his career. And I just wanted to make sure that the underdogs get represented on this list, because they are the ones that we often overlook because they don't always have the jury. So to me, Dan Fouts absolutely would be this pick for me.
Yeah, I think some people are going to say, "What is Luke G doing putting Dan Fouts here at number 8?" I'm not mad at this pick. I think that I remember he was a 3-time first-time All-Pro, by the way. So underselling him. He led the league in passing yards 4 times. And one thing about Fouts as well, I remember I wrote an article probably 2 years ago, back when I was trying to make it blogging, and what the article was adjusting every quarterback's seasons per inflation, how many yards they had per inflation of their era, and Fouts had 2 of the top 4 seasons on that list. So Fouts, definitely, I think, a very underrated quarterback. Again, a little high for me, but I'm not mad at it at all. Kyle, what do you think about Fouts going this early in the top 8?
Yeah, I had him a little hot. I had him a little lower too, but at the same time, like, you can't hate the numbers that he put up. I think, didn't he break his own passing record like 3 times in a row or something like that?
It was something like that.
Yeah,
it was something.
His numbers were just insane, especially for playing in the 70s, and here I got it right here. 4,800 yards in 1981 is just insane. I mean, I'm with you on that. His offense was, his team was next to nothing, but Dan Croyle, I believe his name was the coach. He was a pretty good offensive coach at the time. Unfortunately, they just couldn't get it done in the playoffs. It's another one like that, but he had nobody else around him, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was one of those things that I looked at, and I that's why I asked over and over. I said, "What are the rules?" Because I knew that we could pick the same players, and I said, "Okay, well, I pretty much figured that we're all going to be in agreement on the first couple of picks, but I wanted to make sure that people understood that if you don't know these players that I'm naming, you need to go and look them up. You are going to be amazed at what you see. Like, it's not a game."
And speaking of guys you're going to have to look up, I have a feeling some of the younger audience is definitely going to have to look the guy that I have picking next up. Number 9 on the board. He was my number 5. I am going with Sammy Baugh from Washington. He played from 1937 to 1952. This guy is one of my favorite players ever. So he was a 2-time NFL champion, a 7-time first-team All-Pro. Him and Peyton Manning, only 2 quarterbacks who have done that. He was a 4-time passing leader, 2-time touchdown leader. In 1943, he led the league in interceptions. So you might be saying, okay, who cares about that? But no, he led the league in interceptions as a safety because he was a 2-way player, league-leading safety. And not just that, but he was also a punter and was one of the best punters in the league and had led the league in average yards per punt in the league. So he was a league-leading punter, safety, and quarterback on top of it. He had an 85-yard punt. One of the better just quarterbacks alone, I think he's good enough to be in the top 5. But when you add on all the other stuff, one of the more unique players to ever play. Kyle, what do you think about Baugh?
I had him at number 9, so I'm right on the money with this one. And then I had to do some reading on some of these old-time players way back when, obviously, because I wasn't around in 1937. So surprising. So I mean, obviously, the craziest stat to me was the year he had a 70% completion percentage one year, and the league average that year was 45%.
Yeah.
Like he was just that much better at everybody else. And then he punted 45 yards. He had a 45-yard average per punt, along with being a great quarterback. Like that's just absurd. He has an argument to be the greatest football player of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, I had him at 9. I have 2 of my top 10 that I still haven't been touched. But yeah, I have him at 9. I like the pick here.
All right, Luke, your thoughts on Sammy Baugh?
So while I'm familiar with the name, I have never seen him play. Like, in other words, I've never seen the film on him or anything. I have looked up some of his stats, so I don't want to misrepresent too much information about him. I like to go by the eye test and kind of do the eye test mesh up with the statistics. So, I mean, just from what you guys have said, it was more of a learning lesson for me, because based on what I had looked up and what you guys said, I'm like, oh, I didn't know he did all that. I mean, punter, two-way player. I mean, but given that era, I can see how. So to me, if he did all that and still had a 70% completion percentage, bravo to you. But I don't want to misrepresent it, because I didn't get the chance to see him play. And therefore, I'll take your word for it when you say he's a good player. So I'll take both of y'all words for it on this.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, one thing I did was I made sure I watched at least one game from all of these guys that I have on my list, just to make sure. And again, I mean, he looks like the motion is terrible because it's, the 40s, but like he'll throw the ball 40 yards down the field accurately. Just such a unique player for his time. So moving on to number 10, back to Kyle. Who do you have here?
All right, so I had this guy at number 5. A little bit of a historian note here. This is still easily the greatest Browns quarterback of all time. I'm going to go with Otto Graham, one of the most successful quarterbacks in NFL history. He made 10 championship game appearances between the AAFC and the NFL. And in those 10 appearances, he won 7 championships. He was a 7-time All-Pro and 5-time Pro Bowler in 6 NFL seasons. His first year in the NFL, 1950, he went 10-2 as a quarterback. And yeah, I mean, one of the most successful quarterbacks ever. In that first year, like I said, 10-2 in the championship game, he had 397 total yards and 4 touchdowns. And like I said, the Browns would kill to have him right now. Honestly, he probably still better.
Yeah.
So Otto Graham, number 10.
All right, Luke, what are your thoughts on Otto Graham?
I love it. I have him a little bit lower, though. I did have him a little bit lower. But I do love the pick. I am very familiar with him. Have watched a number of games, thanks again to the classic sports channel that used to be a thing. But he's right. I think if they can get that kind of production right now, Cleveland would be more than happy to have him. If I'm not mistaken, didn't he have an outstanding running back playing with him too, though?
No, Jim Brown played just after him, if that's what you're thinking of. Maybe he had another one, but
no, it was another running back, not Jim Brown. It was another one. I'm trying to think what his name was off the top of my head, but I thought he had an outstanding running back that played with him as well. But I'm not gonna knock him because he had some help. Otto Graham is known for what he done, and to the people who don't, you gotta go. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can watch 3 games on YouTube where Otto Graham is just balling. So definitely check that out. But I like to pick. I didn't see him going with the Otto Graham, but Kyle's impressing me. You're really impressing me today, Kyle. I'm with you.
Yeah, no, Kyle's great. And Otto Graham is great as well. One also crazy stat about Graham. We talk about back in the day. It's sometimes difficult to throw more touchdowns than interceptions. His touchdown to interception ratio 273 to 139. I mean, that's good for today. So I think the one reason I had him at number 7, the one reason I didn't have him as high is he only played 10 seasons. But again, he's another one of those guys, he was in the Navy, so he was only able to play 10 seasons. So a shorter time, but he definitely dominated when he was in there, and definitely worthy of a spot on this list. Going on to number 11 now, Luke, who do you have going here?
All right. Y'all taking a lot of good names off the board for me. I'm going through my list and I'm trying to figure out how I want to play this, because some of them I think should be on the list by virtue of different reasons. But again, I'm going with another underdog here, people. Don't kill me. Don't at me on this one. I'm going Jim Kelly.
Okay.
I just love the story. I love everything about what I remember from Jim Kelly and what he was doing for the Bills. He was a person that I used to look at and often say to myself, like, God, what is wrong that he can't get over the hump? But outside of that, Jim Kelly is probably one of the biggest figures going in that area during that time, and he was a part of all of the different things that was helping the community get up and running. He was doing so many different things. He was bigger than the football part. And then on top of that, he would show up with a broke shoulder, back, leg, and arm, busted lip, no matter what it was, and still throw the ball. And no matter how many times you hit him, how often you hit him, he got up. Again, a person that's underrated that many people don't put on this list. But I want to kind of say something, Max. I know you guys got some great ones. So I just want to make sure that the people who deserve their respect is getting it. And Jim Kelly, to me, is one of those. It's just amazing if you just sit back and look at what Jim Kelly did. The numbers ain't going to always put him up there in the top 5, the top 10, but those numbers are still good enough to make you question who should be in that top 5 to top 10.
Yeah, I like Jim Kelly a lot as a player. I did not have him on my list. I had him as an honorable mention, but I did not have him in my top 25. I think he's very good. I think that he's, fantastic. He could be on the list. I'm not mad at him being on the list. 11 again, very high for me, Luke. But, he had a first-team All-Pro. He did lead the league in touchdowns once and a 5-time Pro Bowler. A very good player and was a huge part of those Bills teams that went to 4 straight Super Bowls. And I mean, we all know what happened when they went there, but it's still a very good player nonetheless. Kyle, what's your thoughts on Jim Kelly?
Yeah, when I looked at Kelly at first, I was like, oh, wow, he only led the league in the major, passing category once throughout his career, was one-time All-Pro. But at the same time, you also have to factor in the fact that he's throwing the football in November, December in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, that's true.
If he's playing in Miami, he's putting up ungodly numbers at that point. I like Kelly, and obviously the unfortunate thing for him is he ran into the Cowboys. But one of the impressive things about him was he was one of the last quarterbacks. He called his own plays, and they were talking about how he did that a lot on offense when he played. Is that he was essentially one of the exclusive play callers on the team, and that's really hard to do. So I give him credit for that. I had him at 23 on my list.
Okay. Yeah, and I have as honorable mention just below. Also, another unfortunate thing for him is Scott Norwood missing the field goal that would have won him a Super Bowl. But moving on to number 12 here. I feel like number 12 for me, this is kind of a steal. I'm getting someone who is number 9 on my board. I thought for sure he would be gone before then. I'm going with the guy who has the all-time touchdown to interceptions record. I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers here. His tape might be the best tape to watch in the NFL. His highlights, especially. Fantastic. The talent itself, being able to move around and his huge arm. And he does all of that while not throwing interceptions. Luke, I know he's probably not your favorite player being a Lions fan, but what do you think about Rodgers going here at number 12?
Well, I actually had him on my list. I did have Rodgers on my list. He was in my top 15, actually just sitting at 15 for me. But I don't know. I think you got him a little high, just given the fact that in that era, the same things that I think Kyle was pointing out, saying that, oh, this person was the top, this one and the top, that one. He's in a weak division, a division that's always been weak. And so a lot of those numbers were inflated. He got a chance to sit behind a person who I would have put ahead of him for about 3 seasons. And overall, he seemingly, while he can play this game, it seems like he is no different than most quarterbacks these days, where he needs a little bit more assistance. But I think Aaron Rodgers is a good quarterback. I think he's phenomenal. I think if you were to just take all the defenses off the field and just watch some of the passes that he throws out there, it's a no-brainer. But when you got him 12, that's a little rough for me. Not because I'm a Lions fan, but because it's 12. You put 12 at 12. so that's what it was. I'm like, did he do that on purpose?
No, but not intentional. But I also think Aaron Rodgers. I think people let a bit of recency bias at the past few years. I think sometimes people forget how good he was when he was, having his, he's 2-time first-team All-Pro, having his fantastic season. At his peak, he was great, and I think he's been very good for a long time. But I think that's fair. If you have him at 15, I mean, 3-spot difference or 4-spot, 3-spot. I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to argue with you about that. Kyle, what do you think about Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I had Rodgers at 11. I mean, I'm with you on this one. I think he's still, even with guys like Mahomes and Watson, I think he's the greatest thrower on the run I think I've ever seen. His mechanics are just flawless, and I think he still has the QB rating record at this point, right? For a career. Let me look that
Probably.
one up.
Last time I checked, I thought he did. Yeah, he did.
Mm-hmm.
But that was during like a season where he threw the ball out a lot too. That kind of helped keep them numbers in line. Like I think he's had a record for the most throwaways or something too.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure, but sometimes that's the right decision to make. Yeah. So, anyways, all right, Kyle, number 13 here. Which quarterback who wear 13 are you going to now select to keep it?
I know, right?
I don't have a 13. I have a number 4 here, and I actually had him at number 7 on my list. So I had him above another Packers receiver, and it's fitting that these two are intertwined. I'm going with Brett Favre, the ultimate boomer bust quarterback probably ever. At his best, he was the most electric player in football, and at his worst, he led the league. He led NFL in career interceptions. So I understand, that's going to be the knock on him, but at the same time, you love the game. And I said that Manning's 5 MVPs is probably one of the most unbreakable records. I think Favre's 3 straight MVPs is never going to happen again. For such a narrative-based award, I just think it's going to be impossible for anybody else to put together 3 seasons where people are like, oh, yeah, we'll give it to this guy. He deserves it. So I just think I'm going with Favre here and how incredible he was for the Packers. And probably, I said Warren Moon with arm talent. He had a great arm. Favre probably had the strongest arm of all time. So I'm going to go with him here.
If I had to pick one person to never have to throw a football as hard as they can against me, it might be Brett Favre with how hard he can throw. When he retired, he pretty much had all of the passing records. They've been broken since then. Brett Favre is my favorite player to watch of all time. I mean, just because of that electric factor. Let's see, I believe I had him at number 12 on my board, so he goes at 13. So, I'm pretty much right around here for him. I love Brett Favre. I think he's a great player. I did have Rodgers higher, but I still think he's very good. Luke, thoughts on another guy who has terrorized your favorite team, Brett Favre?
Yeah, believe it or not, as much as he terrorized the Lions, he was my favorite quarterback the entire time he played. I enjoyed Brett Favre to death. I had him on my list at 5. He was a top 5 quarterback in my opinion for this list for me. I loved everything about Brett Favre. Everybody know he had the arm to throw it. Everybody know that he had the numbers to go with it. But it was the leadership, the amount of energy he brought to the team. There were games where I would watch Brett Favre come out there and the defense would struggle. And he would be over there getting them ready to go while the defensive coordinator is talking and giving all this energy and they would do something. He would run down the sideline with them, and it was the most amazing thing to see. So to me, I would have had him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, but I love the fact that Kyle went with that pick because that was the person that I would have probably took ahead of Aaron Rodgers. The reason I didn't take him ahead of the other guys is because I knew that one of y'all were going to say Brett Favre, and I wanted to make sure that the underdogs and people who have had success but not have the jury get their respects. But great job on that pick. I love Brett Favre.
All right. Well, look, Kyle or Luke, you and I now, a Bears fan, or excuse me, a Lions fan and a Bucks fan, both now talking about how great Brett Favre is. What's going on?
I know this is crazy. This is absolutely this is crazy, but it happens. This is football. This is the best part about football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So who do you have at number 14 on your list?
At number 14, this is a guy that I think that many people recognize for what he did, but he doesn't get it as much, and that's Steve Young. I got Steve Young at that number because I just thought about the circumstances that Whitty had to deal with, having to take over a team after Joe Montana. Like, let's say that again. Take over a team after Joe Montana. And you know that fan base is unforgiving when it comes to quarterback play. And he stepped in and performed and didn't miss a beat. And then he gave a whole nother level element to it because he's one of the most underrated mobile quarterbacks that we don't talk about. His ability to escape the pocket and run and extend plays, he was doing that before the Russell Wilsons of the world. And so to me, Steve Young is one of those guys that I had to put some respect on his name because I saw the way that this could have went for him. If he just missed the slightest beat, it was no way possible for them to not destroy him. And he went in there with flying colors, and I think he passed. Plus, he's a pretty good broadcaster, so I'm gonna give him his props for that too.
Yeah. Steve Young. The only reason I am at number 14 as well. Only reason I couldn't have him higher was because he didn't really get a shot until he was 30, just because of all the, it took him a while until he got a real shot. But once he got it, he made the most of it. Kyle, thoughts on Steve Young?
I also had him at 14, so that's
okay. In sync.
Right. We got our first sweep. Sweep.
Yeah, I mean, I just think he was incredibly efficient as well as being extremely athletic. He had 5 of 6 seasons where he led the league in passing completion percentage. And, his prime was really short. And I guess that's the one knock on him, is that how short his prime was. And that's because he started so late in his career. But then, he had 3 seasons where he started 16 games. And you could easily say he was the best quarterback in the league those 3 seasons from 92 to 94, because he led the league in touchdown passes all 3 of those seasons, was twice the leader in completion percentage of those seasons, and was also a terrific runner. So I like Steve Young, but yeah, I did have him at 14.
Yeah, all in sync there. So we'll move on because us agreeing with each other isn't that much fun. We'll go on to number 16 here. Number 10 on my board. I am going with a guy who played primarily in the 40s. I'm going with Sid Luckman for the Bears. This is someone who won 4 NFL champions. He was a 5-time first-team All-Pro. Really a fantastic player back in the day. And also, interesting thing about Luckman is that the Bears were very good at that time, but a lot of them had to leave due to World War II. Part of me wonders if they didn't do that, could he have won even more championships? Obviously, there's more that we have to wonder about if World War II never happened. But I think Sid Luckman, one of the better players, one of the more underrated players to ever play the game. Luke, what do you think about Luckman?
Now, Luckman, I'm not familiar with because that was so long ago, and it's not a name that people generally put out there. So I'm going to bow out on this one. I'm actually reading on him now because I'm like, Luckman. I'm like, what happened? And so I'm just getting the story about him. Again, I only want to comment if I actually saw it with my eyes. Like I want to see it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna bow out on that one and take your word for it. And while you guys talk about it, I'll be continuing to do some research right now.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. I pretty much spent all today and yesterday just watching old films, so to be ready for this video. Kyle, what do you think about Sid Luckman?
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing, like his 1943 season, he had 2,194 yards, 28 touchdowns, and threw the ball almost 11 yards per attempt. 28 touchdowns in 1943 passing might as well have been like 65 in 2020.
Right.
That's actually insane to have those kind of numbers. He also had a Jameis Winston has 31 interceptions and 47. But I mean, the guy was, this is another, this sounds like another Brett Favre kind of guy where, he's ready to sling it downfield, whether it's a touchdown or an interception. He's going to sling it, and that's all that matters. So I like the pick here. I love the old school football.
Yeah. Luke, have any thoughts, or should we just move on to number 17?
No. Yeah, we going to 17. Yeah, because I'm literally still learning more about the person. So shout out to you guys because I did not know of this guy. So I'm learning now.
Gotcha. All right, Luke. Or excuse me, Kyle, number 17. I got a Luke G and a Kyle G. It's very confusing for me. Kyle,
shocking.
Yeah, number 17 on the board. Who do you got?
All right, so this is another guy who we talked about. You talked a little bit about the Navy in that one. This is another guy who, a lot of this is also kind of a what if, but the peak of his game, he was probably the best in the league at his time. I am going to go with Roger Staubach, 2-time Super Bowl champ. And yeah, I just feel like he lost so many years with the Navy and all that kind of stuff. But when he played, he was so good. And he was just so good to that Cowboys team. And Yeah, that's all really I could say about Staubach, but that's who I'm going with here.
Yeah, I mean, Staubach's interesting. He was he had a great peak. Obviously, he won multiple Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys. To me, I had him at number 21. He goes at number 17 here. I still have my number 11 on the board, which kind of just shows how crazy, how different all of our opinions are in certain areas. But I think the reason why I had him a little bit lower is just simply because of he started late. He didn't get a play for as long. Maybe it's unfair to hold it against him, but that's kind of how I feel. Is that I do kind of factor how much impact did you have in the NFL. And for that reason, I have to have him a little bit lower, but I still think he's on this list. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, to me, I'm in agreement with you on this one, JK. I think that I had him at 26, based on, because I literally did a list of about 50 people, so I was trying to just go through and see. I had him at 26, and because of that, he didn't really do a lot of playing time, and plus, he didn't necessarily have to put up all the gaudy numbers, but I like to look at the whole picture a little different. I wanted to know like who was his biggest competition, and it was like not like enough for me to put him high. But I'm not going to destroy Kyle on this because he did contribute to be able to stop a career and go and serve and then come back and do his thing. So I cannot not Kyle for him. But yeah, I had him much lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I just think, between that and actually it was concussions that ended his season. His best season was actually his last season. And that was at age 37. He had 3,500 yards, 27 touchdowns to 11 picks. And then he ended up finish his career concussions. So he could have been the first guy, we talk about Brady now. He could have been the first guy to play well into his 40s with the way he was playing football at the time.
True.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on now to number 18 on the board. Luke, this is your pick. Who do you have at number 18?
All right, so at 18, I'm surprised that he's still here because I had him a little bit higher, and I did not think it was going to happen. But again, he was somebody who I think defied the odds and shown something that was unheard of, and that is Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie is one of those guys that people talked about his height. Didn't seem to bother him one bit. People said that he would have trouble throwing the ball. Some of the most accurate throws, and you can go back to even his college days, it was from his arm. They said that, it would never work in the NFL with Doug Flutie. Well, it did. And on top of all that, he did that while making a name for himself in a league that had people like John Elway, and at the time the Dallas Cowboys had what's the Lord is his name? Troy Aikman, I think it was. And so to me, Doug Flutie again, and people are going to notice that I am picking a lot of underdogs and people based on circumstances because I'm going by the eye test and the circumstance. Were they a generational talent for their time, or were they dominant in their time that they play? And to me, Doug Flutie had it all. He was one of those guys that you can count on to be a leader, a guy you can count on to get you an accurate pass, and if need be, he would take off and run and get you a first. So for me, Doug Flutie is my pick.
All right. Well, this is I'm gonna be honest, Luke. This is a surprise for me seeing Flutie go here. He's a one-time Pro Bowler, and that's pretty much more or less it. Listen, he was a great quarterback. I wouldn't have him on this list personally, but again, we all have different opinions for what we consider great. Part of what you consider great is, overcoming adversity. For me, I did not have him on my list. Kyle, did you have him on your list?
I didn't have him on mine. I thought college-wise he was fantastic. I had him a little low. I didn't have him on my list overall. I thought in that era of quarterbacks, guys, I just had guys ahead of him as far as you look at guys like John Elway that, still hasn't been picked. I would have taken Elway over a guy like Doug Flutie, but, I like the pick and obviously, go Eagles. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just a matter of just saying that, we know that people are going to do it. And I'm not saying that Doug Flutie is better than the guys that's going to be picked behind him. I'm just saying that Doug Flutie, for me, deserves to be on this list based on the fact that there were some odds against him. And I think that he definitely succeeded in those areas. And I love what he brought to the game. he's the reason. He's probably the reason why some of these other quarterbacks are getting some love and some respect, like Russell Wilson, who they said had a height problem. Doesn't seem to bother them not one bit. But just saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I like the way you're going with this. I'm going to just, pick the people that I want on the list, not necessarily in the proper order necessarily. Listen, I wouldn't have them on the list, but part of why it's fun to bring on a guest like you is you'll get say people that we wouldn't have already said. So an interesting choice there. Again, I don't agree, but we'll move on. Number 19, I am going to go with John Elway here. He was number 11 on my board, so I'm getting very far off from what I typically had. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro. One of them was first team. His stats aren't spectacular. Like, numbers wise, he's not that great. But what he really did was he led a very poor, for a lot of it, Broncos offense. They had some pieces, but for the most part, it was not a very good offense. But he definitely was kind of the I'm going to drag my team kicking and screaming to 2 Super Bowls, and that's what he did. One of the better quarterbacks, in my opinion, and absolutely worth a spot on this list. Kyle, what do you think?
I agree with everything that you. I actually also had him at 11. Ironically,
Okay.
I agree with everything you said, other than the help that he had at the end. I think I thought Terrell Davis is still one of the best running backs I've ever seen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'll go with But overall, I think that Elway's. I think the first half of his career, he had essentially nobody on that Broncos roster, and it's really interesting to see. You talked about his numbers not really holding up compared to some of the other guys. It would have been interesting to see, like, if he didn't win those Super Bowls at the end of his career, where he would hold in a place and like legacy wise. But I mean, overall, his game was incredible. His another great arm, and I loved Elway as a Bronco.
Yeah, and the Elway copter, one of the all-time plays. Luke, what do you feel about Elway?
No, listen, you guys are hitting the nail on the head with this one. I do know that he had this help with Terrell Davis, but I also wonder, like Kyle, if he doesn't win those championships, are we even having this conversation about him? Because before that, he had this stigma where he can do all these things in the regular season, but it was pretty much done at that point. And I love John Elway. Just simply because of the story that he had. Plus, I think he was the first person, if I'm not mistaken, to tell a team, "I'm not playing for you." So I love the fact that he was willing to say, "Let me turn this thing upside down and do it differently," and then to go back to the Broncos and get a Super Bowl, not as a quarterback, but as an executive. It just shows you how much his football IQ was. But I'm with Kyle. If he doesn't win them Super Bowls or get spunked in the air like that, are we really talking about John Elway?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point. I don't know if we are, but he did, so we are. I guess that's pretty much what it comes down to sometimes.
Yeah.
And with that, we can move on to number 20. Let's see. Going back around, did we? I thought I'm trying to think that isn't. Oh no, yeah. Are we? I don't know.
We're in order. My turn.
Okay,
now, yeah.
Kyle. Yeah, you're up to 20. I don't know why. Maybe math is hard. Go ahead.
There's 2 guys I really want to go with here that I still had in my top 15 that we're coming back to here. I was really considering Bart Starr here, but I really want to go with Kurt Warner because I do feel like he is a top. What number are we at now? 20?
20.
Yeah, I do feel like Kurt Warner is a top 20 quarterback of all time. And, he had 2 iterations of his career. First with the Rams, where it was the greatest show on turf. And he won a Super Bowl the year he threw 4,300 yards, 41 touchdowns to only 13 picks. And then he came back and almost won another Super Bowl where he had 4,800 yards in 2001 with 36 touchdowns. And then he had the second iteration of him with the Cardinals, where he almost brought them to a Super Bowl as well with Larry Fitzgerald. So I'm going to go with Kurt Warner here. Just an overall great passer of the football. I'll go with him.
Okay, and also I realized what my mistake was. I was talking one ahead, so this is number 19. So that's why I was confused. Not that anyone cares. Luke, thoughts on Kurt Warner?
He way too high. I love Kyle, but I think Kurt is way too high. Kurt did not make my top 25. He was just outside of it too. I had him at 27. I love his story. He was an underdog. He met all my criteria for the eye test and things like that. But when I go and look at Kurt Warner's career, I saw where he was on very good teams full of talent. And when he had his shot, I believe he was on the Giants. I think that's what it was. I didn't see him elevate anybody's play there. And so that for me kind of knocked him down for me because it was like, were they winning because of you or were they winning because of the talent around him? When he went to the Super Bowl with the Cardinals, I knew that was guaranteed gonna put his name in the books because it's the Cardinals. Like if whoever gets the Lions to the Super Bowl don't gotta win it. They just gotta get there. They will be a Hall of Famer. And to me, with Kurt Warner, I just looked at those teams that he won it with and the team that he got there with, and it was loaded top to bottom, and it wasn't really on his shoulders to win it. He just didn't lose it. So, not a bad pick per se, but I just don't agree that he should be that high.
Okay, Kyle, your rebuttal.
I mean, I get it. I mean, so I think I mentioned Terrell Davis. Marshall Faulk's also one of the best running backs I've ever seen. He had Isaac Bruce. He had Torrey Holt in St. Louis. And then on the other side, of course, that Larry Fitzgerald guy was pretty good. And was Anquan Bolden still on the team when they made that Super Bowl?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, he had great receiving cores. But at the same time, that Giants team was 5-4 while he was there. And then they benched him for Eli Manning because they didn't really want to win anymore. And Eli's record that year was 1-6 as a rookie. And I just think that overall he was a solid quarterback even in that Giant. I think that Giants thing was a little underrated. I think that was a team underrated. I think that was a team that wanted to tank and wasn't really interested in winning at the time. And so they kind of ditched Warner and kind of threw him under the bus for something that wasn't really his fault.
I mean, again, I totally get it, but it's just when I looked at it, I did not see a person who elevated the people around him. I saw a person who had great talent around him. He can work well within the system. He wasn't going to hurt the team. But God, top to bottom, tight end, running backs, receivers, he had it all. And that's when he had his most success. And when he didn't have it all, he wasn't really successful at all.
Okay, well here, I'll break the tie here. And Luke, as much as it pains me, I am going to have to side with my podcast co-host here. I think Kurt Warner is worthy of being on this list. I think he won 2 MVPs, and I think that when he was in that Super Bowl, I feel like he doesn't get enough credit. Everyone remembers the 1 yard short play. People don't remember that with 2 minutes left, it was a tied game, and he was the one who had to throw a touchdown to Isaac Bruce to give them the lead. It was a lot of Isaac Bruce, but it was also a very good throw by him as well. He gave his team the lead with 2 minutes left in the Super Bowl. It doesn't get more clutch than that, in my opinion. So in terms of in the big games, he always came through. That Arizona Cardinals team had receivers, but that's, they were a 9-7 team. They weren't this spectacular team. So I think that his big game performance, again, he had such a weird career, but I think that his big game performance, to me, it's worth putting him on the list.
Yeah, I can respect that.
Okay, so now we will stay with you, Luke, for number 20 on the list. Who do you got?
All right, so at number 20 is simple. I thought that I could have gotten him earlier, but I figured that he was going to slide because I started to pick it up on you guys' trend, and I said this is going to go great for me. I'm taking Frank Tarkin. I had him in my top 15, and I get to get him at 20. And it's because of what he did for the game as a whole. His unorthodox style of play shows you that you can go off script and disrupt the mental of a defense. And he did it often. And so when I watched the games with Frank Tarkin and just paying attention to it, I noticed that the hardest thing for defenses was to be able to account for a guy that they didn't know if he was going to run, if he was going to stop and throw the ball short. It just seemed like he knew what to do when it was needed to be done. And not to mention 4,700 yards, I believe it was, and like 345 touchdowns. And so Frank Tarkin is one of those guys that I looked at and I said, he by far is got to be in this list because the scrambling quarterback was birthed almost at this point with him. Like, he literally just showed you, like, I don't have to sit in a perfect pocket and throw the ball. I'll make you work a little harder. And so for that reason, I'm putting him on there, not to even mention what he did in terms of his rushing yards.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's another one of your picks that I did not have on my top 25, but I did have him as an honorable mention. So I was, he goes here at 20. I had him a little bit lower. I didn't have him on the list, but I still think he's in the conversation for being picked here. I think the reason why I didn't have him as high was because he was another one of those guys similar to Moon. I feel like were consistently good, but I don't know if he ever had that peak for me to say, okay, yes, he's better than some of the other guys I have on this list. Kyle, what did you think?
Yeah, I had him at 23. I mean, he made 3 straight NFC Championship games and led the league in passing when he finished his career, or led the league in passing his last year in the league. I think he's one of the most fun players of that generation. And, obviously his ability to scramble was, unheard of at the time, basically. So I'll give you that. I liked him. I liked watching him and going back and watching those classic games with him. I'm not sure if he's a top 20 quarterback, but he's up there.
Yeah, the thing is for me is to make sure that certain players who did things that added to the game, like there are certain players who brought things to the game that they didn't always have the hardware, they didn't always have the necessary team success, but what they did was they were very good like quarterbacks. They were very good football players. They had very good IQs, and what they brought to their team, what they brought to the city, and what they brought in their game was transcendent in itself. It's very rare. I think Josh Allen might be the closest thing to a Frank Tarkin, a guy who can throw the ball and still scramble. And it's that's how rare it is to see that in this time of football. So that's why he makes the list for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, given what your criteria has been of sort of a lot of it, you talk about what have you brought to the game. I think it totally makes sense by your criteria to have him on the list. My criteria is a little bit different, which is, one thing I said at the top is, we might have different things for what we consider to be a top 25 quarterback of all time. So interesting there. I'm going to go on to number 21. I'm going to go with a guy from your Detroit Lions, a 3-time NFL champion with the Lions. I'm going Bobby Lane here. This is a guy who outdueled Otto Graham to win an NFL championship. He was a 3-time first-team All-Pro. He was also a place kicker. And, again, he kind of led a dynasty, which sounds weird to say about the Lions, but back in the day, they had some big wins, and he was a big part of it. Kyle, let's start off with you. What do you think of Bobby Lane?
Bobby Lane was one of the few old timers I did not have on my list.
Okay.
But obviously, I could make a joke about the ability to win in Detroit says a lot about a player, but I'm not going to say it. But obviously, he did win a lot of games, and obviously beating Otto Graham and those teams means a lot for that age. So I'll be okay with the pick.
Yes. Luke G, your hero, Bobby Lane. What do you think about him?
Now, I could be wrong because I'm drawing blanks here, people. In 1957, it was not the NFL. Am I correct?
Correct. Correct. Well, so right. No, I'm trying to remember exactly what year.
I think it was AFL at that point.
Okay, you could be right. It could be I could be getting the conferences confused then.
So as a Lions fan, I wanted to shamelessly put them on there, but I did not want to put anyone on the list for me who was not in the NFL. Do that make sense?
Yeah,
I wanted to try to keep it to the NFL era because I don't want to count that era because that's a different league for all practical purposes. Like, McDonald's is McDonald's and Burger King is Burger King. So I didn't have them on my list, but God, am I happy you did? Because any promotion for the Lions, I'm all for it. And I understand what he brought to the game and what he did. in that era, especially given the competition that he had to actually go against. He went against some stiff competition during that era. But I didn't have him on the list simply because it was not the NFL.
Yeah, I'm looking at, according to Wikipedia, it was NFL, so I don't know. Maybe that's just wrong. I don't know what's going on. But either way, also one more note I should make is that he, in the third championship, he was injured and didn't play, but they were still there. So yeah, anyways, we can go ahead and move on from Bobby Lane there. Go up to number 22 now. Kyle, we're getting down to it. You got to make sure you pick people who you want on the list. Who are you going to get here with the number 22 pick?
I'll go with Bart Starr here. I had him actually at number 15 earlier.
Oh, me too.
I'll take him.
We're so in sync, Kyle.
There we go. We got to stop agreeing. I don't like this.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he led the NFL in completion percentage 4 times. Obviously, that Packers team was loaded back when he played, but he won 7 championships and was 9-1 for his career in the postseason. And crazily enough, as passing has evolved throughout the years, he still leads the league in NFL postseason QB rating. So, I mean, having that number when he was playing in the 60s is still pretty spectacular to me. So I'll go with Bart Starr here. One of the most, dominant quarterbacks of all time based on winning.
Yeah. One quick correction. I believe Mahomes actually has recently taken the lead, but he's only played a few games in that. I believe Bart Starr is number 2, but anyways, I mean, still ridiculously, it's like, still insane. Luke, thoughts on Bart Starr?
I like Bart Starr. Not killing the pick. I'm surprised that he got this far down because I had him on my list. But again, he was one of those guys that I had only watched limited film on, and I remember looking back at it, and I just remember thinking like the scheme was so beautiful for him, and I mean like so perfect for Bart that I was like, I don't really think it was hard for him to do what he was doing because it was so confusing based on what the coach came up with. I think it's a good pick, but to take Bart. So excellent choice, and I think he should definitely be on this list.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you. I mean, also, I think people forget the Packers in that area were kind of the Yankees, sort of, where they were the team for a while. They were the original Patriots that we see now. Obviously 5-time champion. 2 of them were Super Bowl 1 and 2. He's someone who I think that his regular season numbers might not be as good comparative to the rest of the league, but he always elevated in the postseason and was always great. One of the all-time postseason performers. So that's why he's definitely worth a spot on this list here at number 22. Number 23. Luke, what do you have here?
Now, I had to go back and look. It's weird because I see the same thing you see about that NFL question with the Wikipedia. And then I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and they showed that it started in 1920. And I think what I'm thinking of is the Super Bowl era. That's what I'm getting confused. Okay. Not the NFL, the Super Bowl era, and that's why I didn't have them on the list. So I was trying to figure out what it was because I'm like, yeah, it was a championship for the Lions, but it wasn't a Super Bowl. So I wanted to correct that. Now, at this pick, we are at 23 now? Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. This one was hard for me because as we're getting closer on this list, I was starting to look at this and I'm like, yeah, I know people are going to say that I'm nuts for this and that this is a shameless plug, but pound for pound, number for number, he is in the discussion, and I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford. Yep, I'm doing it. I'm pulling that card right now. Again, keep in mind, I know everybody's going to say he's never won anything. He's never had a team to do so. He just gets empty stats. That's impossible. It's impossible to get this many yards and these type of numbers and say that they're empty. He had Megatron. Well, all our quarterbacks had talent around them too. We're not knocking them that much on it neither. The difference between them is this guy joined the first 0-16 team. The first 0-16 team that had probably the worst general manager in NFL history. And day in and day out, while being in the top most sacked quarterbacks, he single-handedly is performing to give his team the best chance to win. And to prove it, when he was out, they didn't win a single game. So I'm just going to do a shameless plug here and put Matthew Stafford there.
Okay, well, I do not agree with this pick either, Luke. This is now the third pick that you've made that I don't even have on my board. But listen, I mean, I don't want to come off as anti-Matthew Stafford. I like Stafford a lot, but I pulled up his numbers right here. The only stat he's ever led the league in is passing attempts. So he, as great as he has been, and even, which is kind of crazy to believe too, he threw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in a season and still didn't lead the league in either of those, just because of how much talent there was that year. I think he didn't make the Pro Bowl that year, if I remember correctly, which is just wild. But I think that he's made the Pro Bowl once. He's a very good quarterback. He's a franchise quarterback. He's been fringe top 5 quarterback in the league. I would say probably top 10 consistently throughout his time in Detroit. I know some of the numbers might not be as good because of the bad situation. And, as Kyle said earlier, sometimes winning in Detroit is, that's impressive enough. But I can't really justify him being this high, in my opinion. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I also didn't have him on my list. I think he's great for his time in this era, and I think he's been really good. I have said that I feel like, if Matt Stafford's on the Vikings, I think the Vikings probably win a Super Bowl. I think he's that good, and I think he's that talented, and it's just a situation that's obviously killed him. But I also look at some of the all-time quarterbacks I still have on my list, guys like, Troy Aikman, Terry Bradshaw, Ben Roethlisberger, and going down and down. And I just feel like, he's not accolades that, you look at all this stuff. He's just not on the list with a lot of those guys. So that's why I don't have him on the list for that. But obviously, I do wish he was free from the Matt Patricia-led Lions. But,
all right, Luke, what's your rebuttal here?
Look, I totally get what you guys are saying. I totally get it. And again, I wanted to lay out my criteria so I can, have the listeners understand that I'm looking at the individual's play. Everybody's not going to have it. I know that Kyle mentioned Ben Roethlisberger, and it's funny because they are on the same playing field. It's just that Ben Roethlisberger has had the better team, the better coaching. There's even a video on YouTube where I forgot who it was, but they were literally, I think it was Aaron Andrews who had pointed out that, hey, he's done everything Ben Roethlisberger has done, but better and faster and quicker. But the difference is Ben Roethlisberger had the better team. And so to me, I wanted to, put somebody on there to, give the people something to yell at me about, but to also understand that I know the ultimate goal is to win a Super Bowl, but for me, this list is more about the individual. What are they bringing to the game? What are they doing that helps? And what he brings to the game is pretty much the same thing that I say Brett Favre brings to the game. Tough nose, gunslinging, big arm, tons of talent in terms of himself. It's just that the circumstances don't line up for him. But I'm not expecting people to agree with this. Going into this list, I knew that there was going to be some picks on here. I was going to leave some of the better names for you guys and just kind of be a little bit of an eyeball in this one. But I respect you guys' opinion.
Yeah, and don't worry. I know that the commenters on YouTube are always very nice and never say anything mean, so you'll be fine there. Yeah. No, but I mean, listen. Here's what I will say about Stafford is that he's 31, and so if he does this for another 10 years, I might change my opinion on him. But I just think that he hasn't accomplished enough yet at this point of his career for me to have him on the list or even as an honorable mention. But fair enough. You also follow him very closely. But we can get off of Stafford at this point. We'll get on to number 24 on the list. This is number 16 on my board. I'm going Norm Van Brocklin here. He played for the Rams and the Eagles. He was a two-time NFL champion. He played in the 50s. Amazingly, you talk about Bart Starr and what he was able to do. Having the second best, or what he was able to do compared to his era. Amazingly, Van Brocklin still has the record for most yards in a game with 554, which is just wild that it happened that long ago in the 50s. His peak was very good. he doesn't necessarily have a ton of years, but I think he's worthy of a spot on this list. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I had Van Brocklin at 21. He has the passing record, and he actually, we talked about how dominant that Packers team was of that generation. He ended his career. His final game was beating Vince Lombardi and that Packers team in 1960. So that's the way he ended his entire NFL career. And, like you said, throwing for 554 yards in the 1950s is just absurd. That just would never happen. That wasn't supposed to happen. That's like throwing for 800 yards in a game today.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
it felt like an NFL. I watched that game, and it felt like they Matt Stafford went back in time with all of the stuff he's able to do now and started playing, and was he was throwing the ball downfield 50 yards and getting these. It's unreal game. Probably it probably has to be the best game of all time. Luke, any thoughts on Norm Van Brocklin?
I had him at 24. And he was a guy that I had to put respect on his name as much as I didn't want to. I really didn't, but I respected what he was doing, because you're right. He was like, if you were to want to see an old school style Matthew Stafford, he was it. Getting the ball down the field, like unheard of stuff. Like receivers just told to go straight. Don't do nothing else. Run a streak, go. And he just let it rip, and it was impressive to see. So I think it's a very good pickup for you right there. I got no qualms with what you did with that pick. So kudos to you.
All right, and so we have one pick left. Because somehow in my brain I thought 25 was a multiple of 3. I realized that right before the show started. I'm like, why did I think that 25 was a multiple of 3? Math, not my strong suit. Not a math guy. This is why you go to college, kids. But so I think what we should do here, if the 25th pick, is what if we all decide on one person together? We all can say a name of who we had highest on our board, and then sort of debate what we think is better. Does that make sense for you, Luke?
That works for me.
Okay, Kyle, we'll start with you. Who did you have highest on your board?
So, real quickly, I'll go super fast. I want to talk about 2 guys really fast, because I had this guy in as like a token 25. But first, I'll start. The highest on my board at 16 was Terry Bradshaw. That's still.
And, by the way, we can get to honorable mentions at the end too if you want to do that. But go ahead. Yeah,
and then the guy I had as a token 25, because I think this is an interesting debate. So you can easily say a guy like Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. Could you honestly say right now that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest football thrower that we've ever seen?
No, yeah, I mean, I consider putting him on my board despite the fact that he's only played 2 seasons. I mean, I thought that was an interesting talk, because I mean, his 2 seasons have been so incredible. Kind of the reason why I decided not to was because I figured if he retires today, is he a top 25 quarterback of all time? No. But then again, I'm like, is that fair? Because he's not going to retire today. Luke, what did you think?
Patrick Mahomes, to me, I need a bigger sample size. So, and if I were to go look at the individual parts of it, I mean, yeah, he can throw the ball, but it's nothing I've never seen before. And it's one of the things where I think that the media train has built that one up bigger than what it was. But like you, I did have Terry Bradshaw as my next highest one. I had him and Craig were the 2 that I had as my next highest one coming up.
Okay, well, I had George Blanda as my highest, but if you guys both have Bradshaw, I'll be outvoted here, and I'm fine with Bradshaw. I actually had him at number 25 on my list, but I had some guys ahead that didn't get selected, so I'm fine with Bradshaw going here at 25. I mean, just to talk about him for a second, one of the biggest arms in football history as well. I think he kind of I think unfairly gets talked about. It's like he was just along for the ride with those great Steeler teams, and while those teams were great and were a huge reason he was able to win 4 Super Bowls, he was also a big part of it. Luke, why don't you continue the thought? What did you like about Bradshaw enough to put him next highest on your list?
Well, one, it was just a matter of what he brought to the team. He was able to just simply say, if this is the system I got to play in, I'm going to work the crap out of this system. And to me, I'm never going to knock a quarterback or any player who works well within their system. It wasn't like he did like all these amazing things to transcend it, but it was what he did in the clutch moments that got me like, okay, I can respect that. When it was a clutch moment, it seemed like he zeroed in and he knew exactly what to do. He knew where everybody was going to be. It seemed like in clutch moments, the game slowed down for him, and he just simply knew how to lead. And when you watch him deliver some of those passes in clutch moments where it was an error where I can clothesline you, just start off with there, like I can clothesline you. He was fearless to hang in the pocket and get those passes there. So to me, that's what put him on this list to say that, yeah, he has to absolutely be on it. The numbers are not going to always be the most like gaudy, but those clutch time numbers, that stat within itself in the clutch time, I just think like from my memory, he had it. He had that it factor, and that's why he would make that list for me.
Yeah, and he did also win an MVP. Kyle, closing thoughts on Terry Bradshaw?
Yeah, his numbers actually got better throughout his career. They started to, once they trusted him more, they opened up the offense, and like you said, he wasn't afraid to throw it downfield. He was a big time vertical passer, and that was the big thing for him. Throughout his career was his ability to throw the ball down the field, and then winning 4 Super Bowls also doesn't hurt your resume either.
Yeah. For the Raiders Nations fan out there, I do have to say the immaculate reception totally hit 2 different receivers. Should not have counted. But other than that, yeah, tremendous player. And I want to get into a little bit of honorable mentions here. The people that I still had on my list. One guy I wanted to talk about was George Blanda. He was a 2-time AFL champion. I guess technically 3-time. One led to a Super Bowl II loss. What's interesting about him really is that he retired at 31, came back, and then played until he was 48 because he was also a place kicker. So he was, he played until his 40s as a quarterback and then transitioned to a kicker. He was the first player in NFL history to get 2,000 points. So I think that he's definitely someone who I want to talk about as well. Kyle, do you have any honorable mentions you want to talk about?
Yeah, I had a few on my list still. I had Troy Aikman at 17, Ben Roethlisberger at 19. Len Dawson, the best AFL quarterback of all time, better than Joe Namath even at 24. And then, like I said, I had Mahomes at 25 as that, I've never seen a guy throw a ball like Patrick Mahomes. To hit a guy 80 yards on the money for me is still, I still think he's that guy for me.
Yeah, I think you're a bit high on Roethlisberger. I don't have Roethlisberger I did have him on as an honorable mention, but I don't have him that high on my list. I feel like he gets a lot of credit for playing for a very good team. I do kind of agree with Luke there. And same thing with Aikman. I feel like, again, Aikman never led the league in any stats. I realized that he was handing the ball off every other play, or more than handing the ball off a ton. So that's partially why. But I tried to not give people credit just for being on a good team, which is why I didn't have some people there. I also Namath I didn't have on my board. He was close to being on my board. But Namath really had one great season, although also I mentioned that article I made of best passing yards per inflation seasons. His season was number 1 per inflation that he had. So, worth mentioning. But yeah, Luke, do you have anyone else you want to talk about that didn't get selected here?
Yeah, 3 people actually. Doug Williams, Randall Cunningham, and Marlin Briscoe. Marlin Briscoe was the first African-American quarterback before he played it for a little bit, then went over to wide receiver and played a host of other positions. Randall Cunningham was a guy that was kind of a journeyman, but he had a very good skill set and being more than serviceable. I would almost say he was like the Teddy Bridgewater of that era, the guy that could probably be a starter, but it's not going to be like this over the top thing. But I would like to get, and then Doug Williams, the first one to get that Super Bowl. So I wanted to make sure that I acknowledge those 3 guys because they did add a lot to the game and create an opportunity for the Patrick Mahomes, the Donovan McNabs, the Russell Wilsons, the Cam Newtons, and so forth and so on. So those guys were huge honorable mentions for me because I respect what they do. And some of them have the numbers to back it up. But overall, I just couldn't put them on the list based on the individual part because there were some consistency things there. And I think that overall, they just provided something that was new to the game that actually added it. So those would be the three I would put for honorable mention.
Yes, I like it, especially like as a Bucs fan, definitely like the Doug Williams talk there. And yeah, Kyle, any closing thoughts on this?
This was fun. I like seeing a lot of the different takes we had here. I think we all definitely had different variables for where we were grading quarterbacks. I liked it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And Luke, thanks for coming on. I gave you a podcast that had a lot of homework, so apologies about that. But you did a great job.
Loved it. Yeah. I loved it.
Very fun stuff. All right, and to everyone out there, we will see you next Sunday. Well, Luke won't.